So I do not have a stand mixer, so I am just using my regular handheld beaters to mix together my cream cheese and my butter. I want to cream it together till it's really well mixed. And when you feel like you've got that well mixed, you want to add 4 cups of flour. I don't use any particular kind of flour, I just use white bleach flour. So I'm going to measure out. I have a 2-cupper here. The first 2 cups I feel like you can mix with your beaters. And then after that you pretty much need to mix it probably with a wooden spoon. So I'm going to pour my flour in and beat that up. Alright, then I'm going to add 2 more cups of flour. And then I'm going to probably go ahead and just mix this by hand. So I'm just mixing this by hand. And you can see it's going to look kind of lumpy. And hopefully the more you mix it, it'll kind of get together in a little bit of a ball, or you can help shape it into a ball, which makes it easier to divide and put in your fridge for overnight chilling before you make your nut rolls. These actually make nut rolls, apricot rolls. I sometimes will get raspberry filling and make raspberry as well, but the typical are pretty much nut or apricot. I'm going to show you how to grind nuts. This is Grandma's nut grinder. It probably was her mother's, so it's pretty old. We use the nut grinder. It really makes the nuts a lot better, but if you don't have a nut grinder, you can always put them in a food processor. So you're going to grind the nuts pretty fine, and I think what happens with the food grinder versus the food processor, when you put them through the nut grinder, it actually kind of brings the oils out in the nuts, which I think is something that you're missing when you do a food processor. I'm grinding a pound of nuts, and I'm using the recipe that is in your little cookbook that I got you last year or the year before for Christmas. So I'm going ahead and mixing this up. I don't want it to burn, but I want it to get nice and melted. So once everything's pretty much melted, then I'm going to start adding my salt first, and then I'm going to add my nuts. So it takes 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to turn my heat down a little bit. It looks like it's getting a little hot. It's just starting to boil a little bit, and I don't think it needs to boil. It just needs to be hot. Now you can see I'm going to add my nuts a little at a time, mix them up. And I guess if there's not enough sugar in these, I can always add sugar, but I'm hoping it's going to be enough. Again, I use 1 3/4 cups of sugar. And also, if you find that this is too thick, it's your opportunity to add some more milk. You can always add more milk. So as you can see, mine looks kind of thick, so I'm going to definitely have to add some milk here. And I'm just going to add it until it's a nice spreadable consistency. I'm actually going to turn my heat down because I don't think it's necessary that I have heat now. So I think my nuts are pretty much cooked. Yeah, I know this says 1/4 cup, but I always add more milk because I think that recipe's wrong. It's probably more like 1/2 cup of milk, but that's what we have to work with. Okay. So now I'm going to add my vanilla. It calls for a teaspoon of vanilla. And somebody must have told Mom as she got a little bit older to add some maple extract. So I'm moving this from the fire, it's too hot. So I started adding some maple extract. Okay, now we have our nuts. Hopefully you can see these. They're all ground and they're cooled. We have our dough, which I covered with cellophane, and actually I put a piece of wax paper on top. You're going to need a couple other things. You're going to need a rolling pin and something that like sifts sugar. I have a little sifter that I can put powder sugar in. So this kind of gets the clumps out of the powder sugar. I have kind of this spatula thing that's kind of sharp on one side and also works as a spreader. So I got this from Cutco. It's really nice for spreading nuts. You'll need your cookie sheets, and I have my cookie sheets already ready with some parchment paper. You also need a clean work surface. The first thing I do is take my powder sugar, and I kind of spread my powder sugar all over. And then I'm going to take one of my little dough things, my hamburger size patties, and I'm going to go ahead and powder sugar that up a little bit. I might put some powder sugar also on my rolling pin because I don't want it to stick to the dough, because you got to remember the dough is going to be a little bit sticky, which is okay, it's how it should be. And then I just start rolling. It might be a little bit frozen, so I might have to wait a few minutes for it to thaw, because I just took it out of the refrigerator just a few minutes ago. The one thing I know is that if you leave all of your patties out, then you're going to end up with some problems with maybe them melting a little bit early. So you really don't want the dough to be too soft. In between, you might want to put them back in the refrigerator. So I'm rolling. It's starting to get a little bit smaller. My patty, I mean, it's getting flatter, I guess I should say. You don't want to get probably too much powder sugar on there, but I probably should have waited a few minutes. It's kind of thick. I'm going to give it a few minutes to rest, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I went ahead and rolled out the dough. It should be pretty thin, almost palatchinky thin, if you remember how that is. It obviously didn't roll into quite a nice little pie form like it should, but you know, that's how it goes. So anyway, I'm going to take this dough and I'm going to cut it. I'm going to try to cut it into 4s first, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut it yet again into 8ths. But it looks like I got a little bit fatter piece over here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that again, because you don't want them to be too fat. So anyway, now you got your dough, and then all I do is take my nuts. So because I've got this little spatula thing here, I just take my nuts, and I'm going to just spread them on the outside. Yeah, I'm just going to spread the nuts on the long side, and then I just spread all my nuts on my 8 pieces or 9 or whatever I have. And if I feel like I need a little more, I'll go ahead and put a little more on. Anyway, so then I'm going to go ahead and let's do this one. I fold in just a little bit sometimes, especially my apricot ones, in on the side so that all the nuts don't come, or the apricot doesn't come sliding out. And you just roll it, and you roll it in your powdered sugar. So they should look like, kind of like little cigars. And then my mom distinguished the nuts from the apricots. She always took the nut ones and made like a little croissant. You see how that looks, like a crescent? And then I'm just going to put them on my tray. My oven I set to 375. I usually set the timer for 8 minutes. And then I go ahead and check them at 8 minutes. And I will switch the bottom ones and put them on the top row. And if I have 2 sets in at a time, 2 racks in at a time, I'll put the top ones on the bottom. Oh, the other trick is the little triangle part, you want to make sure it is on the bottom of your pan, or else your nut roll will unroll, and you don't want that. And that's all there is to it. Okay, I thought I'd show you how to make the apricot rolls. So it's basically the same thing, but I will warn you. You just want to put the apricot just a little bit and try to make sure you get it in the center of your dough. Again, up toward the fat end of your triangle. Apricot has its way of finding its way out, and it'll make a big mess on your cookie sheet. That's one of the big reasons I line the cookie sheets with parchment paper. So again, I usually just spread it all over, and then I start rolling, and these are the ones that I really take and turn the ends in so that I don't lose my dough. This is what I use, Solo apricot cake and pastry filling. And you can get it at Meijer. I don't know where else to get it, but I've always got it from Meijer's. So what I'm going to do then is take my ends and kind of turn them in, like so. So I'm just rolling it up. And remember, as you roll them, you kind of want to roll them in your powdered sugar. You don't want to have too much powdered sugar on because they will burn. So here are my nut rolls. They're getting ready to go into the oven. I'm going to bake them for 375 for about 8 minutes. I'm going to set the timer, and then I'm going to put them on the bottom rack and then move them up to the top rack for a couple more minutes. So this is about 3 batches, makes up about 1 cookie sheet. So these are our apricot rolls. They're about ready to go into the oven. Again, like I said, I'm going to put them in for 8 minutes and then move them to the top shelf. My guess is they'll take about 12 minutes to 14 minutes. So for the finishing touch on these, all you want to do is add some powdered sugar. And I usually just spread it on while they're still hot a little bit so that the powdered sugar gets to sink in. And then before you serve them, you can actually sprinkle some more powdered sugar on top. Anyway, it's Gina signing off for how to make Auntie Kay's nut rolls.